Hello, this is Lewis. I I've had an interesting 6 months. I went to Thailand, saw my buddy. He got married. So shout out to Colin Smalls, good friend of mine, great training partner. Time time goes by so fast. I'll get to that in a second. Some words on time. Um, but just an update about where I'm at. I broke my arm in September. I fell 20 feet onto concrete off of some scaffolding and broke my elbow, and so I've been rehabbing that. And pretty lucky to, or fortunate to not, have more severe injuries from a fall that high. But years of martial arts and just training hard, my body was preconditioned to take a fall like that. So I did. I I'm pretty lucky. The type of fracture I had is a radial head fracture. So right now, I can almost extend my arm all the way in. Got the almost my full range of motion, but not quite. It gets quite stiff and it locks out um, after I'm working for a little bit. But again, I just got back to training. I had to take about 3 months off training, and I had to take about a month and a half off of work. But I had to get back to work. So it's been hard. It's been hard. I couldn't use my right arm for anything. The radial head is responsible for your rotation and basically your extension of your arm. So breaking that is kind of can be a pretty severe injury in its complexity. But I'm making pretty good recovery. I I read up on the injury, read testimony, listened to people, reached out to doctors, saw specialists, and so I really, in this system, like, you have to really advocate for yourself and become an expert on your ailments, because no one's going to advocate for you. So you have to, I spent weeks reading everything I could about this type of injury, and so I started moving my arm the second day, and I it can be scary because you losing your function in your arm is not fun. So anyways, I've been recovering from that. I moved out of the house I was living in for almost a decade. Right now I'm at a family's house. My family owns a house in Hansville, Washington. So I'm there here trying to save a little money for my move to Idaho. I bought land in Idaho, and me and my lady are looking to build a homestead. And right now we're just trying to gather up the things we need and make the move once the snow melts. The winter there is pretty harsh, and didn't want to go there during the winter and struggle too much trying to stay warm. I bought a RV, fixed up the RV. Going to be the temporary living structure while we build our first cabin or something like that. So that's what's been going on mostly with me. I've been paying attention and reading and listening to everything I can about everything that's happening in this world. And it's hard to, for me, it's like I get these waves of intuition and intuitive thoughts and programming, and it can be hard to articulate like my perceived understanding on things in a way that is useful or helpful to anyone else. And yeah, it's not like I know everything. It's just I feel illuminated, and it's hard. It's hard to watch all these things play out in the world and not be able to do anything about it other than focus on myself and those around me. And I imagine many people can relate to my frustrations there. That I've been listening to Russell Brand and his stuff, and I'm like, how can I do it better than him? He's articulating these messages. I like Jordan Peterson has been having some great conversations with his podcast, and I listen to these guys talk. I'm like, how can I, contribute in a way that is meaningful, and in many ways, it's the wrong way to look at things. Is I think it's the adage is don't let greatness get in the way of goodness. So I have to remind myself of that from time to time, that maybe I won't articulate this message of freedom the best, but I should at least give a good effort. So I've been meaning to write more. I have a lot to say about everything, and almost everything circles back to the monetary policy or the scientific ethics and our morality as a species, and our conundrums of balancing technology and human evolution, and just this overall structure of society and stuff like that. I have a lot of thoughts and perspectives, and I'd like to share it in some sort of meaningful way. But I did have an interesting tidbit, and I thought this was kind of a fascinating point of view, or way to articulate this phenomenon that we all experience as far as time. And for me, it's a little exciting, but like as we get older, time speeds up, and I think if you talk to anybody, who's 30 and older, time really starts to speed up the older you get. And I'm imagining you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it compounds. And I was trying to figure like how do we quantify this phenomenon of, well, obviously the measurement of time isn't changing. It's our perspective of the passage of time is changing. And because like for me, like the last 8 years of my life has gone by rather quickly. And I started a business. I've had a couple of relationships. I've learned a bunch of skills, and I got my black belt in jiu-jitsu. I've had cage fights. I've done a lot of cool stuff. I was doing stand-up comedy a little, for a while, and it's we've been through a global pandemic. I would call it a psychological operation to introduce you all to some sort of biosecurity state. Anyways, the passage of time, though, is like these last 8 years have gone by real quick. But I remember 8th grade summer lasting forever, and my parts of my childhood just seemed to drag on. And time for me when I was younger definitely seemed to seemed to last longer. But and this phenomenon, I think, is perfectly described by imagining that your perspective of time is shaped by your experience of it. and you got to think of like an ever expanding timeline of you start here and it starts to creep this way, just a nice linear timeline. And that timeline, the ever expanding timeline, is your existence. So if I'm 10 years old, those first 10 years is my entire existence. And let's say it's this space. We had another 10 years, and it's this space. So my first 10 years is not the same as the next 10 years because the rate of change might be the same, but the delta of change is different. So the percentage of change is changing, right? So the every if so I at when I'm 20 years old, my first 10 years is now 10 years older, and so I had experienced that time 10 years ago. All right, this is getting a little convoluted, but I think you're getting the message. The percentage is when you're 30 years old and a year passes by. That's only I think what's that 3% of your life. I'm 16 and a year passes by. It's 16% of my life, right? And then let's say we become really kind of conscious of our like personality, ego, and the passage of time, probably around 4, 5, or 6 years old. So like in many ways, between 6 and 18, you're that for that experience. It encompasses more of you than the next 18 years piled on, because in many ways there was a longer see, this is why it's kind of difficult to articulate this, but you were that age, you were a child for a larger portion of your life. And so yeah, man, like what I found so interesting and supportive of this is I think it helps us kind of quantify why one, as we get older, time ceases to move quicker, pass by faster, but it also explains why childhood trauma is so hard to deal with. It's because in many ways, like every year you spent in suffering as a child is not just 1%, 3% of your life, but it could be a huge chunk. It could be half of your life experience really was you struggling as a teenager. And as we pile more years on, it's just adding more water into an already existing pool. And so I thought that perspective was interesting, and it was a good way to kind of extrapolate like the importance of like one, creating good habits as you get older, because time's going to pass by a lot faster, and two, understanding why it's so difficult to rid ourselves of like childhood trauma is because in many ways the time that we had as children made up a larger percentage of our overall existence than the years that make up our adult life. And you never get your childhood years back. At some point you were 8 years old and your entire existence was wrapped up in those 8 years. I just spent 8 years learning a trade. I spent 15 years learning jujitsu and martial arts. So it's different, and time is really relative in that sense. So anyways, I thought that was interesting. I do want to commit myself to writing more. I really want to support people. I think I have a lot to offer, and yeah, it'd be nice to write more and it just get the message out that humanity deserves to exist, and we should do better for ourselves. So, anyways, this is me, Lewis. I appreciate you, and I hope you're doing well.